Welcome to another episode of Son of Elijah. My name is Mac the Lion and I'm your host for this program. We continue our series on Satan's toolbox or the witch's toolbox. And by connecting with this, we are going to bring you to a problem in the world that we live in under the 7 dimensions of wickedness, of which is all compartments existing in Satan's toolbox, the instruments he uses for the mutilation of lives and destiny. There's a lot of us that grew up in environments where we were neglected. There are some of us that people neglected us and today we are neglecting others. And negligence is a sin. There was a day I was praying for someone and God told me, tell him he must repent for the sin of negligence. I didn't know that negligence was a sin up until that hour. That's when I saw clearly that you could actually function in the sin of negligence by neglecting those you are responsible for. Because that word negligence is only tied to responsibility. You can't see someone you've never met before, even a kid, and then ignore them or just go on by and then someone say you are negligent. No, it only has to be to your words or those you are responsible for or those who have been placed in your care or those you are provide some level of guidance and leadership for. And when you don't attend to them or you have children somewhere whom someone has a child for you and that particular person, you do not even know how those children are fending because you've neglected them. That is negligence. That's the spirit of abandonment. I told a man one day, the reason you're abandoning your children is because your father also abandoned you, and that spirit of abandonment is haunting your existence. Now you need to push back on it or it will ruin your life and ruin your children. They will become damaged and they will become vulnerable to all the things that are affecting, attacking life, because life in itself is filled with a lot of people who are assaulting the destinies of people on a daily basis. There are people who are out there doing despicable things for what they can get, and your children will fall a trap to it if you neglect them. That's why you can't leave a child to raise him or herself. You need to give them complete attention, and if they don't get attention from you, they will get attention from their peerage. If they don't get from their peerage, they will get it from adults who have no business in their lives. And if you know anything about adulting, at times there are people who come around individuals who are predatory in their ways, and as a result of that, they will prey upon them and they can ruin them both physically, both mentally, and both spiritually. That's why you must make sure that you provide your words and those who are under your care some form of leadership. There is no one that ever comes around me. That's one of the first things I want to find out. You have kids? Yes, you do. Where are they? How are you providing for them? You must never leave them to the world, because if they look for their essentials and they can't find it in the primary provider, they may find themselves being vulnerable. And I've heard many stories, and at times it's worthy of someone crying over when people tell you the stories of the things they had to endure because their primary caregiver was not there. It will create insecurities in that person, and because they were also abused, they will become abusive. That's why you see some people are drunkards. Some people, around the house, they're always drunk, they're always this. Everyone knows when daddy's irate and is drunk, you must stay away from him. And then they can bring ruinage to the lives of those who are under that type of leadership. Well, after a while, they begin to absorb the spirit of that man who actually is very abusive, and they would also abuse their own children someday, or they become overprotective as a result, because it can also create a counterbalancing effect where they go from being abandoned and neglected to where they now become overtly protective, of which they now smudge their own children in trying to guide them. And you see such women or men still trying to mother and father their children even when they are 30 or 40 years old. And now we have this syndrome that is prevalent today, where there are individuals that have the failure to launch. They are unable to launch, literally, because they are still living with their parents in their 30 years. I went to the courts for something one time, and I ran into a fellow who later came and started talking to me. And then I asked him, what brings you here? And he begins to tell me that I brought my own parents. He brought his own parents to come and open up a case and then come and stand up against them. I said, but I don't understand. He said, my parents are mismanaging my life. They are telling me what to do and blah, blah, blah. And then I asked him, how old are you? And he said 36 or something. I said, you have no business living in your parents' house at 36. You should have left when you were 20, and now you are 16 years late, and now they are telling you things and you don't want those things to be told you. Get a job and move out, and no one needs to tell you what you need to be done. And I don't care whether that child was misraised. You can't sculpt their destiny again at that 35, 36. At that point in time, they are fixed, except they become changed spiritually and then now recognize the fatherhood of God in heaven, and of course the leadership that is also provided through spiritual leaders of a pastor or a teacher or a mentor, a prophet. Then that can now make them them a baby again spiritually, and from there they can now begin to grow into God and start changing their ways. But if it's just a function of the house they were raised, you can't keep a child that long. You are wasting your time because they can't change at that point. That's the point where they should be independent and living their life already and following whichever thing you've already taught them. That's why you teach them in time, so when that time comes, they can be able to discharge that quality of life. Now, you have to understand that Satan's number one target is to make an infidel of everyone on the earth. Being an infidel is not just you being distrustful and not being able to believe in God who created you, but much more than that, you become distrustful of everyone, of the system, of everyone around you, of the community, of those who were originally created by God to make a mark in their lives. And all this is rooted in the fact that that notability or that notoriety is now being made impracticable simply because there is a seed, there is a dark matter in your flesh that was planted by Satan, that was planted by witches, that were planted by the agents of darkness, that is now producing the condition that is robbing you of the substance of God that is within you, and now you are functioning. So Satan placed in you something that is the opposite of what God originally designed you for. He took away that value and then put his own in, and his own is the contamination of your life. Before I go any further, please kindly just tap on that button over there, tap on the like button, and if you've not subscribed up until this point, please just quickly subscribe. I'll give you a minute to do that, even as we begin to go further and deeper into that which you are saying. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Now we continue where we were. The end game of the devil is to make sure you are stripped, is to make sure you are naked, is to make sure that you have no one, hovering or covering you. Is to make sure that your life is naked and bare without spiritual covering or physical guidance. Satan's end game is to make sure that you become distrustful, is to make sure you become unfaithful in life, is to make sure you become undependable, where no one can ever trust your words or you can be dependent to do anything. You say one thing, you do another. No one can ever count on you. No one can ever depend upon you. No one can ever even depend and put people around you or children in your care, and they will be intact by the time you return them. And the reason why this happens is because there are individuals, there are people who are rooted with that spirit of unbelief, distrustful and unfaithful in their conduct. And that unfaithfulness is what makes them function the way they are functioning, because Satan wants to make sure that your nature is corrupted. Satan knows that he cannot override your personality because it's natural from God, but he will contaminate it so that he will now have a handle over your personality. And that's why there are people we deal with every day who function a certain way one way, and then in another time they behave very differently. And the reason they do this is because they are constantly battling with that nature that is corrupted them, so they are contaminated with the ways of wickedness, and now their very personality is being skewed and bent in such a way they are now doing things in a way they should not do it, and it's now producing an end result that is contradictory to the originality of what God created them for. And that's what makes some of them become so corrupt and insecure. And when people are insecure, they are suspicious of everyone. They are suspicious of their boss. They are suspicious of their spouse. They are suspicious of everyone they are dealing with. And without trust to a certain level, you can't trust everyone, but you have to trust someone at some point. Two cannot work except there be agreement. You can't work for somebody if you don't trust they will pay you at the end of the month when that time comes. There are all kinds of dimensions to trust, and you must have faith. Without faith, you can't produce. So Satan will do everything he can to ruin your trust mechanism so that you are never bold and confident in life. So when you are still younger, he tries to push you towards being rebellious and stubborn, and that spirit of stubbornness will make a vagabond out of you. You will roam in life. That's what it means. You are meant to travel in a linear fashion, straight, make a beeline towards your destiny. And yes, there may be stopovers, yes, there'll be stumbling blocks, yes, there'll be hindrances, but then you keep moving in the direction you are sent to do, because Satan can't stop you. He can only hinder and slow you down, but stoppage will be determined by you willing to stop after you are convinced that you shouldn't pursue the greatness that God invested in you. You see, that's how he functions. So the spirit of stubbornness is a spirit that desires to make a vagabond out of you. So you see people that go to places. I remember there was a fellow I knew many years ago. Next minute he will tell me I'm in Jamaica. Another minute he tells me I'm in London. Another minute he tells me I'm in the US. I keep asking him, all these places you go to, what do you do? Because I don't understand. I know you have money. I know you have earned a bit of resources. I know that your father is wealthy and left you a lot. Even his home was worth millions. His father bought for him cash, wrote one check and paid off the house. So I said, I know you are extremely blessed and you are wealthy, but you can't be a vagabond. You can't be roaming the whole landscape of the earth, just traveling, backpacking. He doesn't even backpack because he has resources, so he can stay in 5-star hotels, stay in some of the best places in the world. 1 minute he called me, say I'm in France. What is wrong with these people? What's up with them? It's almost like as if they are being untoward towards me. And when he was explaining, I said, no, it's because you can't speak the language and your functionality. But I knew that he wasn't meant to be there, because he was meant to be in his nation doing whatever God had designated for him, for his community, for the people around him. But now he was going to other people's nations, and just without a purpose. He wasn't going for work, he wasn't going for business, he wasn't going for transactional outings. He was not going for even a vacation, because you can't take 20 vacations in a year. He just kept going in, and because he had this frequent flyer on Virgin Atlantic, he could go anywhere, discounted as it were. He just kept doing all this thing. And I knew specifically the reason, that the spirit of a vagabond was already hunting him. At one time he told me, I'm going to the US. What are you going there to do? No, I just want to go and buy parts for my car. I said, what are you talking about? Which car do you have that cannot be bought in the local shop? You cannot get what you need. No. He said, no, I just want all the best things regarding my vehicle to be bought all the way from the States. I said, this is a vagabond spirit. No purpose, no direction. He's just coasting away. And it was Satan. And later I was now shown, because there was an encounter my wife now had, where she said that she saw in a vision that the enemy had planted something beneath his head, at the back of his neck. And that thing was what was regulating the spirit of a vagabond, and the fact that he was roaming from place to place and going everywhere without a purpose, having resources but no direction, and just doing whatever he liked, but he could not produce any calculated, designated end at the end of the day. And then when she told me, I said, I believe that revelation you are sharing with me. And she told me, said it's in his head, it's also in his brother's head. And his brother is also even worse than him, because now I don't know what he's doing. He was well schooled, went to one of the best universities in the world, speaks with a Queen's accent, but this guy has no bearing. He has not accomplished nothing. He doesn't even know what he's doing with his existence. And it's not because he's not a resource. If he wanted $10 million for an investment, the money's already sitting there. But now he's wasting his existence, because the spirit and implantation of a vagabond was in him. My wife told me clearly, she said, I saw that vision, that his father had some type of situation many years ago in the 60s, wherein that he had some type of concubine, and as a result of that, she was the one who invaded that family and then placed a direct curse into the lives of his first 2 sons, because the rest were girls, but the first 2 were only boys, and those specific 2 received those implantation. And that implantation meant they were embedded with something. You could call it a chip, but actually it's the dark matter. And with that, they were vagabonds. Even though they were not disrespectful to their father, but they would just not produce, they would not just deliver, they would not just go on the trajectory of that which they were originally designated for. And I saw it clearly, but do you understand it? Until my wife said, that's what I saw, planted at the back of their neck. It looked like a dark stuff, and it was just sitting there. And with that thing, it was controlling them. It was micromanaging their existence. And yes, they were Christians, and yes, they followed the Lord, and yes, they were in church, yes, they were committed to their church, yes, they were there, but it did not change that, simply because the man pastoring them was a pastor, and pastors don't have access to depths, only prophets do. When things are planted spiritually, whether it's in form of witchcraft or whatever it is, embedded in their inner man, that thing can only be removed by someone that has a prophetic office, and that prophetic office is what will go to the root of it and install it. And if that person does not have a prophetic office, he can't get to it. He can be in a service for thousands and thousands of years, if it's possible for him to live that long, but that problem will persist simply because of that implantation. So Satan will make an unbelieving heart out of them, so they will always lack the confidence to pursue things. They will be unfaithful because they will never follow through on things. Procrastination would always be something that resonates with them, because tomorrow is the only day that appeals to a lazy man. Tomorrow is the only day. When you ask him, when would you do it? He say tomorrow. When will you take out the trash? Tomorrow. When will you go to that school? Tomorrow. When will you start that project? Tomorrow. When will you invest in that business? Tomorrow. When will you start that new idea? Tomorrow. When will you go and ask that person to join you to do that initiative? Tomorrow. When will you start the building project? Tomorrow. When will you finally start that book you want to write? Tomorrow. When will you eventually settle down and get married? Tomorrow. When will you start raising your family? Tomorrow. When will you pick up a new program and do your PhD program? Tomorrow. Because tomorrow will always be the day that appeals to them. It will never be today. And when they get into that tomorrow, it will become tomorrow again. And that's why you see years down the road, they've achieved nothing, because of that vagabond spirit that is driving them to roam, to just keep going around, R-O-A-M, roam, to just keep roaming and roaming, perambulating, going from place to place, checking this one, seeing that one, interacting with that one, but never. That's what in some places they'll call that person an area person. An area dude. Oh, we know that guy down the street, the guy down the street. The reason is because he's an area dude. He's always loitering, he's always chilling, he's always relaxing. You always see him hanging out, doing nothing. He's always hanging out because he's a roamer. He's always hanging out because he's a vagabond. He's always hanging out because he knows everything that happens on the streets, but he's never adding value to the lives of people. He will never add anything. He will never make a mark. These are individuals that will originally called and created by God to be notable. So every time you are walking down the street coming from work and you see young people chilling, relaxing, drinking in their Porsche, or just wasting, or doing all the rubbish they do, hanging out, knowing who is the latest chick on the block, knowing who is the latest lady they should step up to, and all these distractions and things, know that these individuals were originally created to make a mark in their community. And many a times some of them love their community, but now they are not able to help that community because they themselves are vagabonds. They are now the area guy down the road. They are now that dude down the street. They are never anything accomplishable. Some of them will just be that dirty old man, that dirty individual that keeps screaming, "Get off my lawn." And it will become a second nature to them because of the corruption and the mutilation of the dark matter that Satan embedded when they were still young to make sure they never attain notoriety. So the next time you see a young man doing nothing, look at him square in the face and tell him, now you need to get out of this and snap out of this, because if you do not, you will become an area, a non-entity that will amount to nothing, and that zeroness will be a functionality of your own compliance that you have given yourself into. Now, someone may ask me, how does Satan transmit and transfer it? It is done through contamination, and the contamination is normally done through a curse. A curse. Many a times it's a curse. Some it's a bloodline vulnerability where they inherit a weakness that has always been in their bloodline, and so that weakness is a functionality of how their father was. Like someone told me the other time, and he said, you see this guy, he has a problem. His addictions are rooted in the fact that his father was like this, so he just picks up from where his father stopped. So we could say clearly there's a transference of that vulnerability through the fact that the father's blood is already vulnerable to that, so Satan is able to jump or hop onto that specifically, and then they now become also vulnerable, and then they become failures, or they become strugglers and straddlers, and they are not able to attain the relevancy of their existence simply because that is what the devil has already scheduled for them. You have to understand this is the dynamics of the manipulations of the wicked one, and he does that through a curse that people inherit. I always say something: all your battles in life will come from two track trains. The first one is your father's demons, the second one will be yours. And many a times the first one is your father's demons, but you will awaken them when you are tempted to act that certain way, because no child was born to be smoking nicotine, no child was born to be a drunkard. But if your father is a drunkard, a day will come they'll be presented with the opportunity to also start drinking, start sucking on nature's juice, as they like to call it, and before you don't know it, that nature's nectar they are sucking on now becomes their own deprecation, just in line with their own father, who is now a ruined individual because he's addicted to alcohol, he's addicted to sex, he's addicted to something or the other, gambling. He's always on the streets throwing cards, throwing dice and all these things because he's a failure, he's a loser, as it were. And then his son picks up on it because that vulnerability is already there. So Satan capitalizes on that devil and now give it to him. It now becomes his inheritance. He now has his own heritage from his father's ways. If his father is marred with laziness, he never goes to work, always looking for which young woman to mooch off. There are people like that. They're always looking for a free couch to surf forever. They are not interested in owning anything. If one person dumps them or tells them that we are no more in a relationship, they move to the next. There are men like that. And then there are children. I remember one lady spoke one time. I was watching a show and she told the judge, he says, "Sir, can I say something? I'm the cousin of this man, and I will tell you something about the men in our family. They have a problem. The problem is that they always use women for what they want. It is always for their money, it's always for their couch, it's always for their food, it's always what they do." He said they never own anything. They never desire to go to work. They don't care about that. They just look for whose couch to sleep on and then mooch off that woman, drive her car, live off her benefits, and then never bring anything to the table. All they do is to bring the services that they bring in the nighttime, and that is it. And then when this lady was talking to the judge, and because there was a matter that was being settled, and I said, this is a curse. That is actually a curse. That means the vulnerability has already existed through the lineage. It's already there. And the vulnerabilities that have been present in that lineage is what is now being consistently extrapolated and made very clear by the fact that these individuals are going through some level of compliance with the pressure that Satan is placing upon them, simply because their blood is already having that vulnerability, which is actually a curse. Because Satan knows what worked on your father will most likely work on you, except you reject it outrightly. And another example I will give you is this. There was a white woman, there was a lady I was praying for, she's a white woman, and then I was ministering to her, and then in the midst of the prayer I stopped and I said, I'm just hearing something now. The Lord is telling me that the reason why you are trapped and doing this thing you are doing at this point in time is because your mother cursed you. She did curse you, and that curse is what is now affecting and putting this pressure for you to do the things you are doing now. And then she busted into tears and said, you know what, I was only 13, I did nothing, I went to school, I came back home, I was in my room doing my homework when my mother walked in. She was drunk and she looked at me and said, you will never amount to anything. You will never reach anything in your life. You only become a whore. That's all you will become in this life. That's all you will amount to. Men will seek you out just for sexual pleasure, but no one will really want you. And then she said, I was only 13. I didn't understand why my mother was saying this thing to me. I asked her, I said, are you sure? He said, yes. He said, I was not even where she was. I was just in my room doing my homework like what a 13-year-old would do. And she walked through that door and then she pronounced a curse over me, unprovoked. And she was drunk. Later, when she got out of her drunken state, I was asking her, I was talking to her. She was trying to deny that she ever said anything like that, but she said it while she was drunk. And then I told her, I said, now we need to go after that curse. Because at that point in time, the lady was already under serious pressure to provide sexual services for people, sexual favors for individuals for money. In short, she was not living that life before. But now, the COVID happened, a lot of things happened. She lost her home, she lost her resources, she lost her income, she lost her job. And then now, someone now told her, come, this is what I'm already doing. We're doing, body cam, sex cam, girl cam, and all these things. And then if you come here, you'll be able to earn some income. And now she was not comfortable with it, but now she needed to eat, and then the pressure was mounting. So the day I met her, because a situation brought us in contact, because it was a place we were staying, and they were neighbors. And then in a conversation, I looked at her, I said, but God is telling me something about you which is contrary to what you are doing right now. And then she started crying, and then based on that, I started ministering. And in the midst of the prayer, God showed me that there was a curse coming out of the mouth of a woman against her, and now that curse was putting pressure on her to do these things and then mutilate her existence. And then when I now told her that this is what I saw, and she said it happened when I was 13, and then I now said, now let's begin to come after that curse. Let's begin to fight it. Let's begin to speak against it. Let's fight it, because that is how to overcome. So someone will ask me, how do you overcome an installation that Satan has placed in my members that is pushing me towards doing stupid things, towards insecurities, towards being stubborn, bad, distrustful, and infidel, as it were, always suspicious, always bare, always doing things that are silly, always being mutilated, doing corrupted things, giving people what they want just for what I can get, trying to use people and all these things, abandoning responsibility. How do I deal with it? And it's very simple. You have to make sure you don't own it. You have to fight through it. What does that mean? You see, every one of us have things that were bequeathed us, either by deception, either by curse in the bloodline, either by being misled, either by a curse, either by someone pronouncing words that now become an enforcement of wickedness against our destiny. And now we're under pressure to comply to those mutilations. But one thing you need to know is this: when those pressure comes, it is not a sin, because temptation is not a sin. It is only when you act on it. Now, when you act on it originally, you may feel uncomfortable, but eventually when you now become comfortable doing it, at that point in time, you've owned it. And once you've owned it, you are gone. Once you've owned it, now you're in problem, because at that point in time, if God judges the matter, you will be judged. That's why Jesus says, judge now, before the day of judgment, and you will not be judged on that day. When you look at the matter and say, this is wrong, and then judge yourself, then God will remove it. God will not remove the installation until you delegitimize it, and you can't delegitimize it until you fight it. But as far as you embrace it and say, I'm just a man, my life is, you have to understand, it's not easy to live right, that in this world we live in, and then you give excuses for your bad behavior, and you continue to become an instrument of wickedness. What have you done? You've now owned the filthiness that was implanted into you. I believe that irrespective of how witches get involved with people's lives, Satan finds ways to make sure everyone is somehow compromised with a seed of implantation that is designated to control by remote control satanic influences. There are people that are acting like as if they are possessed, but devils are not in them, but there are installations that are within them that Satan is using to literally control the functionality of their lives. And by that functionality, they are now doing things that are silly, and the silliness of their conduct is now pushing them down towards a trajectory of ruination and damage. And that's what you must understand specifically, that you have to fight through it. You have to isolate what those weaknesses are, what those problematic areas are, and then you must go the opposite direction. You must fight it. You must not comply with it. You must fight. I tell people, don't fight outward, you fight inward. The devil within you is actually the one that is destroying you, not the one without. Because there may not be a literal devil living in your members, but he can have installations in your members that he's using from the outside to control you. And once you remove that implantation of wickedness, the one on the outside can no more control you, because he has lost his connection, his interface. And that's how it works. If you open a television and remove a tiny chip that the manufacturer puts there in order for the remote control to connect with the device and then release and control and launch features that will show up on screen, once you remove it, that remote will no more connect. Now that remote will still be a real thing, that remote will still have batteries in it, that remote will still send signals, but now no signals will be able to send back to it, because you have removed the connection and interface that is embedded in that television originally. It's the same thing. Whatever the devil puts in your life, you can get rid of it. When you eventually do get rid of it, Satan of course will not change his nature, because Satan is scheduled for destruction, and as it were, he's still on the earth doing his rubbish, killing people, manipulating them, stopping them, and fighting and doing everything he does in order to destroy humanity. But all those things will be heavily limited when you yourself refuse that his implantation and his devices will not be in your members. And when that is the case, then Satan has nothing he can use in order for him to put you down or mutilate you. And Satan has no instrument he can use. He has nothing. No matter how much he tries, he will not be able to garner resources and strength to push you down a path, simply because you don't have that chip in you anymore. You don't have that implantation. You do not have the dark matter in your members. So you need to fight through it. That means you need to fight it and fight through it. Stop fighting people, as it were. Fight the installation on the inside, and then the manipulators and the people on the outside will have nothing to use. And once they have nothing to use, their projection have failed. Once they have nothing to use, their workings have failed. Once they have nothing to use, no matter what they try and do, it will amount to nothing, because you have succeeded in removing implantation of wickedness, which is the dark matter that Satan uses. That's why Jesus said, the prince of this world hath come to me, but he cannot find anything that belongs to him in my body. He can't find anything that he can use. So Satan has no choice but to just keep trying to do what he does from the outside, but he cannot bring your damage or ruination and limitation from the inside, because Satan knows exactly that those things will amount to nothing as far as you stay focused on the word of God and make sure you stay away from anything that is contradictory. You see, when you fight the temptations, when you resist it, when you push back on seduction, on corruption, on deception, when you stand against the workings of wickedness, when you push against it, what happens? The devil will find out very quickly that you are doing everything you can to make sure you don't comply with the temptations. You see, there are temptations without and there are temptations from within. From within is called lust. The lust is an inner pull that tries to lure you and make you do something. But on the outside, the devil will always be there. There will always be voices. There will always be those who want you to join them and do despicable, debaucherous things, immoralize, do unclean things. And these individuals will not stop, because by nature they're already somewhat mutilated and compromised. But those on the outside is not my problem. It's the devil that is on the inside that is my problem, because the pull within is now the corresponding pull of lust that wants to get you to do things that are contradictory to God's will for your life, and then you find yourself complying with the instructions of wickedness. And that's what the Bible calls them when it says the children of disobedience. The children of disobedience are the rebellious. The children of disobedience are the ones who are stubborn. So stubbornness is the opposite of being notable. Stubbornness is the opposite of notoriety. Stubbornness is the opposite of the value that God originally put in you for you to make a mark in your generation. And if you make up your mind right now to stop being stubborn, I've met people who are so stubborn, I can't mentor them, I can't lead them. Even when they come out and say, this man is my father in ministry, this man is my father in the Lord, at times I just think in my mind, who is your father? I can't be. The reason is because the Bible says that the father of a fool has no joy. So I can't father a fool, because now he wants to steal my joy by the reason of his stubborn behavior. And you will learn very quickly they are stubborn, because they only make that when they are happy and excited. But when the going gets rough and you now tell them don't do this, that's the time they will tell you that they originally know what they want to do and how they want to go about it. And then why are we wasting our time? Why are we even having this conversation? Why are you even seeking for help? There are people that come for prayers, and I tell them at times, follow instructions, do what you are told. If you follow through it, you have results. Many a times when I tell you things, I don't know why I'm telling you why you must do it that way, because when I go into those prayers, I have no script of exactly how we'll go into it. But there are spiritual things that is already embedded in my spirit by God, by the Holy Spirit, for me to be able to follow the Holy Spirit and then wirelessly transmit the life of God that is within me into the lives of those who have been sent to. But for their frequency to lock in with mine, they have to first follow the instructions, comply with what I tell them, and in that alignment, it's easy for that strength and grace that is within me to be transferred to them, and then we are able to lock together, become a true witness, where the Bible says if two shall touch and agree. So when the both of us touch and agree, then we are able to produce and have the results that God has scheduled for us. But anything less than that will abort God's purpose, and then we are not able to accomplish the reality and the realization of what we were originally sent to do and accomplish. And the reason for this is simply what I'm saying. You have to focus, you have to follow that leadership and fight through it. You must fight through the temptation to be disobedient. You must fight through. I remember there was one I was talking to the other day, and I said stubbornness is the reason you are where you are. By now you would have broken through. By now you would have been great. By now you would have had somewhat of a national impact. But the problem with you is that even at the time it matters the most for you to comply with the simplicity of basic instructions, that stubborn spirit kicks in. And that's how I know there is still an implantation of seed that the enemy placed within your life even at a young age, that is still speaking through your life even at your advanced age, because you are not able to isolate that voice and then hear and then comply and then make changes so that your life can be in betterment in the up and up, and then you can attain the fullness of the reality you've been scheduled to do. Once you are not able to do that, that means you will fall below the mark of your designation, and that's what it means to fail. That's what it means to fall short of God's glory. That's what it means to sin. And it will not come natural as that vagabond spirit will drive. Remember what God asked Satan. He said, where have you been? He said, I've been just going everywhere on the earth, roaming to and fro. That's the spirit of a vagabond. That's the nature of the devil. That's what he targets every single one, so that at the end of the day, they never attain the fullness of the reality that God scheduled them and never reach the zenith of your existence, simply because they are constantly being manipulated by the things of this world. So you need to understand that the curse and the abuse and the negligence quite a number of us go through growing up is what the enemy uses literally to transmit that wickedness. And the way we push back on it is for us to make up our mind that we must fight it, we must not own it. So I may say, do you know that I was minted a snake when I was a kid? Do you know that this happened to me? Do you know that, even the witchcraft you are talking about, the reason why I'm in it today is because someone initiated me, someone put me into this. If that is the case, then you need to fight it, then you need to disown it, then you need to reject it, because the very minute you begin to do it and enjoy it, you are gone. I repeat, the very minute you begin to enjoy the things they are telling you to do, you've come of age to reject it, but you refuse, because now you can no more claim ignorance. At that point in time, you are gone. The enemy have caught you in his net, and now you are trapped, and you may trap onto the eternal perdition if you allow that trajectory to maintain itself. That's why we must do whatever is necessary so that we can grow in God, so that we can establish in this truth, so that we can make a difference in our community, so that we can attain the relevancy that God has scheduled for us for, so that at the end of the day we can attain the nobility of being notable in life and in the designation that God has placed us on the earth. I will leave it there. My name is Mark the Lion, and I'll be your host for Son of Elijah. Please do like, subscribe, share that which you are hearing, and also feel free to join us to spread out our links to others who may also want to listen to some good stuff and make changes to their lives. And then also, if you want to be a part of our initiative here, go to the description box, and then you can use any of the platforms to give, be it locally or internationally. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Son of Elijah. Bye.